Yeah, so welcome to the podcast, Daniel.
Thank you very much.
Would you like to give a quick introduction of yourself?
I'm Daniel Lebrero. I'm a team lead for the platforms team at Akvo. I'm just a regular Java, old Java, and a Clojure developer now. Have been doing this for 18 years now.
Time flies, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, I remember everything of my career, to be honest. A lot of things. So, yeah. So yeah, no, I don't think I'm special. I'm just a regular guy.
Yeah, it's a good thing to be.
I'm just old there.
yeah, sure. So has it been Java most of that time?
So I have been doing, I will say that, I always say that I'm a Java developer. So I have been doing Java for at least 15 years now. But in the last 5 years, I have been mixing it with Clojure, and I have been trying to do Clojure most of the time because it's just, it's nicer for me.
Yeah.
And just, doing 15 years the same language, maybe you start to see all the bad things and none of the good things.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's the grass looks a bit greener in other places, I guess.
Yeah, and maybe it's the type of applications that I have always built that, Clojure resonated really, really, with me.
So how did you come across Clojure? Where did you discover it?
How did I discover it? Well, that's funny. It was one of my bosses. He mentioned that somebody in some bank was using Clojure for their own development. And his words were something like, they do things in like a tenth of the time, and then they spend the rest of the time just mucking around with random stuff. So it seems that they were really productive with it, and they used the rest of the time just to play around with technology. And at that time, maybe I have been using Java for around 10 years, 11 years already. So I was looking for alternatives. And initially, when I learned that Clojure was a Lisp, I would say like, no, Lisp parenthesis, no way.
Oh, yes. That's what people usually say.
Yeah, so it was no. It took me at least a year or 2 years after I learned about Clojure to actually have a proper look at it. And during that time, I tried to learn Scala because in the Java world, at least I think Scala was the obvious replacement for Java.
Yeah, it feels like it.
Yeah, so at that point, it felt like that. That's what I will tell everybody. But then I was unable to learn Scala. It was too difficult for me.
Okay.
So out of desperation, I think I just looked at Clojure. I started looking at it, and it was like a blast for me. So everything makes sense. Everything makes sense at that point.
Really must have been the right time to pick it up then.
Yeah, well, I was really desperate. I was at this point of my career that I said, like, I'm going to stop being a developer because it was just too painful. It was too painful at that time, the things that I was doing.
Okay.
So, I remember the day that I gave up on Java, basically. It was, I was just working, and in the Java world, I don't know how much other people know about this, but in the Java world, we have DAOs that return DTOs, so data transfer objects, and have always been building integrations. And I had to do something where I had to add a field to a DTO. And that meant that I have to copy and paste a lot of code and create a lot of classes and just copying fields from one place to another. And I remembered that I said, I don't want to do this anymore.
No.
So I got up. I told my boss I'm going for a walk, and then I took the rest of the day off. Basically, it was
long walk.
It was that bad. Yeah, it was a very long walk, and I just like, I don't want to do this anymore. And that's when I started looking at Clojure. I just had a look at Clojure, and as I said, it was I was ready to become a manager. But Clojure is, it's so nice. It removed most of the pains that I had with Java, with doing integrations, with workflow, with magic.
Oh yeah,
It made everything simpler.
Yeah. So it wasn't any like particular feature of Clojure. It sounds like it was more the whole thing.
It's the whole package. It's so in order if I give a talk about bits that you can use, bits, ideas that you can use in Java that come from Clojure, and while preparing the talk, I realized that there are not that many things that you can actually use. And I look at the whole package in Clojure, and for example, there from my point of view, there is the thing that there are two things. One is dynamically type. Is the first time that I use a proper dynamically typed language, and that's something that put me off a lot at the beginning. But the dynamically type with the REPL, with a REPL workflow, is so much nicer than the Java static type with the compilation, with the it make a big difference on the way that I actually work. It's just a completely different level of feedback. So I have been doing TDD. I picked up TDD in 2001 out of the Extreme Programming book. And I have been always doing TDD, and my main reason to do TDD, it was just because of the feedback loop. Yeah. Because it's the fastest feedback loop that I know of. Yeah. It's just it's TDD. Just I'm making progress. I am writing the right thing, and when you see people not writing tests and having to test everything through the UI or through
it's a long loop.
It's a long loop. You don't realize, or if you don't know any other thing, you don't really realize how slow it is. And with TDD, it's pretty fast, right? Yeah. It's 10 seconds, 5 seconds. It depends what you're doing. Yeah. But then once you learn about what a proper REPL gives you, you see that feedback loop of a few seconds on TDD is very, very slow also. So it's another jump on the fast feedback loop, and that make for me a big difference on productivity. If I compare my productivity as a Java developer versus my productivity as a Clojure developer, have the feeling that I have improved a lot. It has make a, it's completely different workflow, completely different mentality.
So you're using the REPL instead of doing any TDD, or is it a complement?
It's complement. So I think it's more of I think if you have not done TDD, or if you don't believe in TDD, you with a REPL, you stop writing any test that you would do before, because you get that really fast feedback loop. So you stop writing tests. I'm a big believer on tests, so it complements the TDD workflow.
Yeah. Okay.
So how do I explain this? In part of what we do as developers, or at least from my point of view, one bit is, okay, I understand what I need to build. Yeah. And if you understand what you need to build and how you need to build it and all the APIs that you need to talk to and everything, then you are able to write tests and you can make progress pretty fast, right? And you can use the TDD workflow. I know what I have to do. I know how everything works. So you can just write tests. You can just write tests first. Now, I think that every project that I work with, absolutely all the projects, even things that have been working for years on, there is always, I call it an exploration phase.
Yes.
And that exploration phase is the first thing that you have to do to, for example, understand how an API that you need to integrate against, how does it work? Yeah. Yep. What is going to return? What kind of errors can you get? Yeah. Or if you are going to, for example, connect for the first time, if you are going to use a messaging system for the first time, you need to understand what APIs, how it's going to behave. Yeah. All of that is
Yeah, and how it works in practice.
It's how it works in practice. Yeah, and even APIs or libraries that you are going to use in your project, you really need to understand how those things work.
Yeah.
And how do you understand those things? my personal experience is that I write little programs. And when I say I write little programs in Java, what I would write is little tests.
Yeah.
Or little programs with the main where I can just run it and see what you get back. You change a parameter, you run it again.
Oh, yes.
That's what you do. Or if you are calling a database, what you do is, I'm going to try this SQL query, now I'm going to try this other one. And, you just want to play around with the thing to really understand how the thing works before you can actually start working.
Yeah, exactly.
So all that exploration, I do it with a REPL. I do it inside a REPL.
That makes sense.
And within the REPL, what you are using, you're using your production language. So you are not using different tools. You're not using a different tool that then you need to translate into production code.
Oh, that's true.
You're using your production language. And in the case of Clojure, when I'm doing that exploration, I'm actually doing it within the project files. So I'm not doing it in a different place. I'm just doing it in my project. So after finishing that exploration, what I end up with is with a lot of production-ready code.
Yeah, inside the REPL.
Not inside. Well, when we say inside the REPL, the things the REPL. How do you say it? There is a difference between a REPL and a shell. Mm-hmm. I'm going to call a shell what you will do, for example, in Linux when you are adding when you are playing around with the shell.
Yeah.
You're trying to write a program in Bash or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
If you are just typing there and piping one thing into another, blah blah, you are just playing there on the shell.
Yes, makes sense.
Yeah, with a REPL, what you have it's within your IDE. So in my IDE, what I do it's I write really little snippets of code that then are evaluated inside my running application.
Yep.
And what I'm doing is basically changing the production files to add more functionality within the production file. So the REPL, it's a network. It's how to say, the REPL is running inside the application.
Yeah.
But what we do is you connect from your IDE to that running REPL. So you're really working within your IDE, not in a special window. You're just working in your project files. So just imagine you're modifying your production files all the time. That's basically what you're doing. You modify your production files and you keep running your application. You keep modifying your running application without ever stopping it.
Oh yeah.
And you do that both for writing your production code and you do that also for exploring what you need to build, how you're going to build it, and you do that. Not using, it's the REPL is not a special tool in Clojure. It's just the same as your production application.
Yeah.
So there is no barrier between I'm working with a REPL and I'm working with my production code. It's the same thing.
Yeah. This is super interesting because this is something I've been wondering about as someone who hasn't really used an environment with a proper REPL like that. Like, how do people work sort of between this stuff and the production code? And I think I'm just compartmentalizing things too much because I haven't done it myself.
It's very I have one of my talks is about how to use a REPL and I realized that after doing the talk, people still don't understand what. And I do add, it's the talk is basically a 30 minutes demo about using a REPL.
Yeah.
And after it, I see people I still don't understand what you mean. It's like, what are you doing?
So how did you sort of get it? Was it just by doing it a lot?
Doing it, yeah. I think when you start using a REPL, you start with basically the same what you will expect or what you expect. The usual one is okay. I get a shell. Mm-hmm. Right, I get a command line interface where I can type my code.
Yeah.
So a little bit like a Unix shell.
Yeah.
That's how you get started. But then just a matter of reading what other people are doing, and then you realize that you can connect an IDE to a network REPL. Yeah. So to a process that is running a REPL.
Mm-hmm.
And then usually in the IDE you have a special window to type commands. So that's the second step. You are within your IDE, but you have a special window where you type your commands.
Yeah.
And from my point of view, the third one, once you start understanding what you're doing, is when you don't work on a special window. You are just working on your production files and you just keeping, changing your running application all the time. And you don't have to. This is one of the things that I said. You don't copy and paste code after you have finished your REPL work or your session. It's not that you copy pieces of code into your production code. It's that, well, it's already in your production code. You have already finished. You're already done.
Yeah, that's so cool, because I think that's really the thing that I didn't get before you started describing it now. In my mind, it was always, they're probably writing stuff over here and then somehow moving it over to the left side or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's the first impression that everybody gets. But no, it's just you're writing all the time in your production. You're modifying your production application. So there is it's not a different tool with a different semantic, with a different language. It's just the same thing.
Yeah.
So that removes a barrier of having to copy and paste and having, it's more fluid.
Yeah, a lot more. So is this a workflow that like is recommended practice or something, or did you sort of discover it all on your own?
I think any Clojurian that you talk with, they will tell you that that the REPL it's an integral part. It's one of the selling points.
Yeah,
it's that quick feedback loop. It's one of the selling points, and it's just the first thing that you do when you work with Clojure in any project. The very first thing that you do, it's you always start the application with a REPL, and then you connect and start adding features into your application, which is completely the opposite of what you would do in any other language, and at least in Java.
Yeah.
In Java, you create your classes, you blah, and then you try to run it to see if it works.
And it doesn't.
Wow. Yeah. So here is the opposite. You start your application and then you connect to your running application and then you start changing it until it does what you expect it to do.
Mm-hmm. So,
does it make sense?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I'm going to watch the videos as well, like get my mind expanded a bit more. But I think it's falling into place a bit.
It's a little bit. If you I tell the JavaScript developers, they have the Google console. Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you have open your dev tools.
Yeah.
The workflow more or less is if you open your dev tools and you start changing the source code directly there, and you see straight away the result of changing that in your UI. That's the kind of idea. So it would be like having a proper ID in the DevTools. Google DevTools.
Yeah, and from that side, I can really start to get sort of excited about it, because I want that all the time, because I do mostly JavaScript development right now, and I always have that back and forth. Like, it's really nice to have stuff in the console here, and I can try stuff, and I can set breakpoints. But then I need to change something in the code. Now, should I go back? Yeah, I would like to go back, and I also would like everything to be available inside the console, because it's really annoying to have to do I want to expose this manually in development mode or something?
So that's the idea. It's just have one thing, and you are all the time connected to it, and being able to evaluate little pieces of code to see how the browser behaves. Being able to inspect the state of the application, right? You have some state within your JavaScript application to be able to go there, poke at it, like, change it, and when you change the state, that everything redraws itself. Or being able to change it, or being able to debug it, or it's as you said, it's like having that dev tools within your IDE and have no friction between one world and the other.
Yeah,
I think that's the idea.
Yeah.
So Clojure, Clojure has an idiom, or it has also Clojurescript, which is a version of Clojure that it's target to JavaScript.
Yeah.
And if you see the demos that the Clojurescript guys do, they're working on their IDE, they're making changes on their IDE, and they have the browser on the right hand side. And as they make changes on the IDE, they see the application changing.
Oh yeah.
Without having to reload, without having to manually click anything, they just see that
Yeah, it just happens.
It just happens, and it's immediate. So no compilation, no F5, no, it's
Yeah, so
I think that's the important thing, that immediate feedback loop.
Yeah,
it's really, really, really important.
Yeah, and it's like you said, if you haven't been there, you don't really even know what you're missing. It's like, yeah, but of course it works like this. How could it be faster?
Yeah. For me, it's one of these things. Like I didn't even knew.
No.
Before knowing Clojure, like, well, you don't really know what you're missing, and that's part of my, how to say, Clojure has made me conscious about that. There are a lot of things that I don't know and I don't understand, and there are probably better things than that's what I know right now.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And I like how you said that you didn't even. It's not like you came to Clojure because you were like interested in Lisp languages or something like that. I mean, it's kind of good to hear that you don't have to be like a Lisp addict from the beginning to sort of pick it up and enjoy.
No, not at all. As I said, just I was how do you say, a regular developer that whenever we think about Lisp, is like, no, not too many parentheses. I was the same. I was exactly the same. Like, no, not too many parentheses. It makes no sense.
And I think I haven't really done any Lisp, but I'm sort of like appealed by the language. I think I think the thing isn't that there are a lot of parentheses. It's that so much other stuff has been removed because you don't need it in the end.
Yeah. So So how do you say? I'm right now completely sold into the Lisp idea of the parentheses. Now that I understand it, but before getting there, before understanding why the parentheses, what's the point of all of this stuff, it was like, no, too many parentheses, too difficult. And the funny bit is now that I do Clojure, Java, JavaScript, have been doing some Python recently. I realized that in Clojure, I never ever misplace a parenthesis.
Wow.
It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. Yeah, it doesn't happen and it hasn't happened for the last at least 3 years. It doesn't happen.
How come?
Well, because you use an ID. And this is one of the things that I have never realized. In the IDs, they have shortcuts. They have when you are modifying your code, the ID understands about the parentheses, right? And a parenthesis is like a list. Yeah. So you have shortcuts to say, move this list to the next list, or bring this next list inside this list. So you are moving like expressions. You are moving a whole expression all the time.
Oh yeah.
So you never misplace a parenthesis. It's just it's. I'm surprised. I was surprised once I realized that, I have that problem actually in Java and JavaScript. Like, either a semicolon or a curly bracket or maybe some parentheses. I misplaced those, but in Clojure, in Lisp, it doesn't happen because, once you get used, once you understand that you don't copy and paste code by hand.
Yeah.
So I'm a IDEA user.
Yeah.
So IDEA has this concept of, and it has it also in Java, that to select the next scope. So you are on top of for example, inside the body of a method, and you said, select this particular scope. Select the next scope. So it will, for example, it will select how to say, an object. And then you say, okay, select the next bigger scope, and it will select the object plus the method call.
Oh yeah.
And you say, select the next one, and they will highlight an if statement. For example, if it's within an if statement, it will get that scope. You say, select a bigger scope, and then it will select the whole body of the method.
Yeah.
So that way, IDEA understands about the structure of your Java code. So it understands that thing about selecting a bigger scope.
Yeah.
With Lisp, with Clojure is the same, right? You're still using IDEA for Clojure, and you can select that bigger and bigger scope. And what you're doing is, you select whole lists, and then you copy and paste the whole list. So you never, I never have to select things by hand.
Yeah.
So I never copy the wrong number of parentheses. Yeah. I don't know if it makes sense. So
I guess that type of selection is probably something I should think about doing in all languages, because it's probably there somewhere in my editor as well, but I don't really think about that it's something I should be able to use.
That's how do you say? Yeah, how do you know things that you don't know?
Exactly.
I don't know. I have always been very big on pair programming. I think pair programming is an excellent way of learning.
Oh yeah.
So a lot of the things that I pick or other people pick, it's just you are, that's what you said. You're sitting there doing I don't care, Java, Clojure, whatever, and you see the other guy working, and it's like, wow, what did you just how did you just move this thing here, there? How did you do that selection? And you just learn it because you are seeing somebody to actually doing it. But if somebody comes to me and like, oh, can you explain me about ideas? Like I cannot really, I don't know.
No.
I don't know what to explain to you. But if you see me working with it, you will probably pick up a lot of things that you didn't know, and I didn't know that I know, and I didn't know just pick up things. And pair programming, I think it's just awesome way of actually learning.
Yeah, I mean, it's so easy to think like, it doesn't really matter which IDE I use, right? I don't use that many features, but I probably do.
Yeah, probably. And this is something that people don't understand, that is, you as a developer, you know a lot of things that you don't know that other people don't know.
Yeah.
There are a lot of things that we are very shy, or we are very, how do you say, but we don't realize that we know a lot of stuff.
No, it's so true.
And IT is so big, and all, software development is so big that, we probably, and even a junior guy will know a lot of stuff that me as a very senior guy don't even think about or don't know about. So, yeah. Yeah.
So do you think you're using IDEA, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think is that like the recommended IDE to start, or is there something?
My recommendation, and I think this is one of the reasons that I never learn Scala, is my recommendation is to use whatever you are used to.
Yeah, makes sense.
Don't try to learn two things at the same time.
Good point.
Yeah, so if when you get to one of these things, okay, I want to learn Clojure, it's like, okay, learn Clojure. Don't try to learn Clojure and Emacs or Clojure and Vim at the same time. It's just going to be too painful. So right now in at least in Clojure, you can use any ID. All IDs, they have their own. They have some kind of integration. So to get started, to get the basic auto-completion, a REPL, all that stuff. I'm going to say it's available probably in all IDs. So just whatever you are used to. Don't try to learn two things at the same time.
Makes sense. It happens so easily. I mean, especially when it comes to web development. Oh yeah, you should learn JavaScript with React, of course, and then you need Babel, and then you need this and that and Node, and
yeah, and then you're lost, right? And it's like, no, it's just the learning curve is just so huge that it doesn't,
Yeah.
It looks very difficult, or it looks like, so yeah, it's just one thing at a time.
Yeah.
And that's part of when I learned Clojure, I actually had to learn also Emacs at the same time. So that was actually quite a challenge.
Yeah, I bet.
But having that REPL experience, it actually encouraged me to just keep going. So I know now enough Emacs to be able to do some stuff with it, but as soon as they created a proper plugin for IDEA for Clojure, I haven't opened Emacs in maybe 2-3 years now.
No, use good tools. It's
I'm not going to say everybody loves Emacs, so that's maybe one of the things that I should actually learn. But I'm really comfortable with IDEA. And I think it's part of what we said before. Like, I'm not sure what I'm missing in Emacs.
No, that's a big point. I mean, those people who really enjoy it, they're sitting around writing Emacs Lisp files and stuff. I guess I don't really. This is definitely also a case of I'm not sure what I'm missing, but it feels like there are at least two groups of people, and one group is like me. Okay, I'll use this tool. It's here. I'll use it. I'll learn it, and so on. And the other side is I would like to build my own tool. I would like to modify my tool But I think that's almost too dangerous a rabbit hole for me. I could see myself sitting around. If I started modifying my tools, I would perhaps never finish.
Yeah, I think that's part of the how much time do you spend? How do you quantify the time that you save by customizing your tools or building your own tools versus the time that you will spend doing things by hand?
Yeah, it's hard, and I think I spend too little time modifying my tools. Actually, I probably should do it a bit more.
You have to have how do you say sharp tools. So I think as developers we sometimes don't write programs for ourselves. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I see myself, and I see a lot of people that I need to add I don't know. You have a file, you need to add a dot at the end of each line, and you see people doing it by hand, like with the keyboard, dot down left, dot down left, dot. That's maybe a silly example, but I see people doing that, and I see myself sometimes just going to a website and clicking around all the time instead of just saying like, oh, come on, you're a developer. You should be able to automate something as simple as browsing a website and going to a page and filling up some form. That should be easy enough for us to do.
Yeah.
To spend like 10 minutes automating that, and then you can run it multiple times. But you have the other issue that sometimes we start doing that little automation, and then you spend a day, and then you realize, oh fuck, what I was doing? I don't remember even what I was doing.
Yeah. It's difficult, but I think it's in any case it's really good to sort of at least get so far that you start seeing those opportunities, and then maybe it's a different skill to learn which opportunities are worth like pursuing. But starting to see the rooms for automation, that's a really good skill, I think.
Yeah. That in fact is So I used to have a course in my previous company. I will do a when people join the company to have we used to have very junior people, graduates, and I will go through 1 hour of explaining things to make you more efficient.
Oh, nice.
And one of them was, it's one of my favorite tips for anybody. You have to learn Bash.
Yeah.
Bash is such an amazing tool. And I think it's one of the things that we undervaluate.
Oh, yeah.
But on my 18 years of career, I think I learned Bash maybe the first, second year. Bash is the only thing that I still use. After 18 years, is the only tool that I've been using, for my whole career. And it's useful every day. It's useful, well, maybe not every day, but every other day. It's something I will write a small Bash script to do whatever, to do something.
Yeah.
And it's something that, it's a very, very good investment. It's a very good investment. But I remember learning Bash, and I remember that it's very difficult to do a for loop. Now I know how to do it. It doesn't, but it's tricky in the sense that it has a lot of silly rules. Doing an if statement, doing basic things. I remember it being difficult. Now, if you ask me, no, it's very simple. But I remember it being difficult, being very annoying, spending a lot of time learning about it. But I think it's the best investment that I have done. And you don't have to do it all in one go. I'm going to spend, I have never read any books about Bash or anything like that. But, today I want to, I want to make HTTP requests. I want to make 5 HTTP requests, one after another.
Yep.
Well, learning a Bash just a little bit. You don't need to even finish the whole automation or anything. But, okay, how do I do a HTTP call from Bash? How do I get my results? How do I store them? And if you spend 30 minutes, I think that's one of the things that I always said. You have to time limit yourself when you're trying to automate anything.
Yeah.
For yourself, not for the company, but for yourself, you should time limit. Okay, I'm going to spend 30 minutes. I can spend 30 minutes, or I can spend 2 hours on this. And after that, you have spent that time. You have to be disciplined enough to say okay, now I'm going to do it by hand, or I'm going to do it the old way. But you can spend those couple of hours to learn. And, those when people complain that they don't get time, at the on the day-to-day job to learn, for me that's like, okay, I'm going to spend 1 hour just trying to automate this thing. And if I succeed, it's great because it's going to save me X amount of time. But if I fail and I'm not finished or I'm not done, I still have spent 1 hour learning. So next time that you go and try, instead of 1 hour, you maybe will finish in 30 minutes and you will be able, to be more productive. And at the end of the day, it's just that, being able to write little automation tools for yourself, it makes a big impact on looking or being more productive.
Yeah. I feel really inspired now to do more of that again. And we should say, I think, that a lot of this stuff, or starter points for this stuff, is also in a blog post you did, right?
I have a talk about nice. But out of that I have a talk and some blog posts about
So
and from my point of view, the idea is you are a developer, you should be able to write programs for yourself, and it should be cheap enough for you to actually do it all the time.
Yeah. So do you have any like favorite personal little automation thing you've done, or?
Anything you get? How do you say? You can get quite carry away. Once you and you can do a lot of fancy stuff. But for example, last week, we were looking at this Python application. I don't know anything about Python, nothing at all. But I wrote, we have some performance issue. Because I'm touching Python and I don't know anything about Python, what I wrote is a little script that with the production logs, I would run a script that will run 10,000 requests from production, and it will compare the results between production and my local changes, just to make sure that first the new code was at least as fast as the old code. Plus, I didn't introduce any bugs.
Yeah.
And, that took me maybe an hour to do. And being able to do that, it gives me a lot of confidence.
Yeah. I mean,
on my own work. And it's like, and I don't think about it anymore in the sense of, this is pretty cool. But, it's not as simple as I make 2 HTTP calls. It's like, okay, I make 2 HTTP calls. I have to record the time. I have to compare the time. Because there are different URLs, you have to start changing the contents a little bit because you expect some things to be slightly different. Then once you get things that are slower, you have to record which URLs were slower, which ones actually one returned an error, the other one didn't. And you create, you are all the time creating like really little scripts, little programs to be able to do, to help you with your own work, right?
Yeah. Do you have like a I don't know, a certain way you create your automations, or is it like different tools for different situations, or is everything like bash scripts that you call from the shell?
I usually start always with bash. Well, I usually start always manually until I realize that I'm doing something too many times, and then it's when I go to use bash. And after 18 years, I think my bash is not very good. It's not very good. I know the basic. If you look at how I do it, I'm how do you say? It's very brute force. Really, really brute force. Yeah. I know like maybe. Well, I think I know like maybe I use always the same 10 or 20 commands.
Yeah.
So, so I do very, very brute force. And if I cannot do it with that, is when I now jump to Clojure and I would just write some little Clojure program to do some more fancy stuff.
Yeah, makes sense.
But yeah, it's. I think that the trick is first recognize when you are doing things manually.
Yeah. And
then realize like, well, is it worth investing the time to actually write a program? And then okay, I jump to bash, and when bash becomes just too complex, it's like, well, I jump to Clojure.
Yeah. And sort of like selecting the tools that you can create a solution efficiently in.
Yeah.
Because I guess that's also a thing, like don't try to pick a completely new tool to create your automation in.
It depends. Again, if it's tools for you, I think one of the great things about creating tools for yourself is that you can choose whatever language you want.
Yeah, that's true.
So if you are, I have been learning. I apart from Clojure, Java, and JavaScript, I also know Ruby and Erlang, and I know Ruby and Erlang because there was a point in time when any tool for myself that I will build, I will choose those two languages, even if they were not probably the most appropriate ones.
Cool.
But I wanted to learn the language, and having to write these little programs really helped. It's a real problem that you have that you need to solve.
Yeah,
so. And again, it's because they are for you, so nobody really needs to touch them. Nobody needs to maintain them.
No, that's true.
You don't need to maintain them yourself. So it's a great opportunity to learn about other languages, other things. But again, you do this when you do this. You assign an amount of time, so you don't spend too much time.
Yeah.
Or not too much. You don't spend. Not too much time on those things.
Yeah, okay.
Limit your time. Yeah, it's a learning opportunity. You have to take it as a learning opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's super interesting. So I guess we should start wrapping up. I think we'll have to do more episodes. It feels like there's so much left to talk about.
Yeah, I've talked too much. This year. So the older that I get, the more that I talk.
But it's all good stuff. And like I said, we'll link to the blog posts and the talks we mentioned.
Okay, cool.
Everything else I can think of. Anything else you want to add here right at the end?
No, I don't know. I cannot think about anything else. No. I think that's enough.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Daniel, for being part of the podcast.
Cool. Thank you very much for having me.
Talk to you again soon.
Cheers. Thank you.
Let me put it this way, Mr. Raymer. The 9000 series is the most reliable computer ever made. No 9000 computer has ever made a mistake or distorted information. We are all, by any practical definition of the words, foolproof and incapable of error.